Welcome to episode 39 of the Landlady Boss podcast. I am here with my sister and co-host Rachel. Hi, Rachel. How are you doing?
Great. Hi, Marie. How are you?
I'm well. We're back talking about deposits. Last week we did part one, and we really did a deep dive into how much to charge for the deposit, what it is, checking out your state laws, even what requirements are for returning the deposit and your listed itemized deposit statement. So we went and talked a lot about those details, but there's so much important information, I think, to talk about deposits that we wanted to do a part two because there's still things to talk about, like what to include on the deposit, how to collect the deposit, and then how to protect yourself as a landlady. So much good information. And I think people think of the deposit and they think, that's super simple. You just, you collect the deposit and then it's there and then you just give it back to them. But there are so many details that go into it that we wanted to make sure we cover all the information you're going to need to make sure that you're following things legally and just preventing a lot of problems and disputes that happen with tenants over the deposit.
Right. And I think that we have a lot of different types of landlady bosses that listen to us. So some of them do have tenant portals. And so you would have the people sign and an e-sign and it would be automatically saved on their tenant portal. And then they go online and on their tenant portal, they do a electronic payment for their deposit. So it's really easy for you to just go look on their ledger and then you can see, oh, they paid this amount on this date, done. But a lot of other people do not have this. Like if you only have one or two properties and you're a lot smaller in the way that you keep your business, then maybe you're meeting them and they're writing you a check right there and you have a paper document that they're signing. So one thing I did when I was in that stage was I would write on it, on the contract at the top, how much the deposit they gave me, the date, and then have them sign next to it, just so that like I put received deposit. And then I would take a photocopy of it or a picture and just kind of keep it in your documents so that you can even print it off and put it next to the contract. So that would be a paper way of keeping your records. Yeah.
Right, that's a really good point, and making sure that you're taking a picture of it. Of course, as you grow and you systemize things, you're going to have hopefully all of this automated, because I know when I have an applicant that, we've gone through all the due diligence and we've decided to extend a lease to this applicant, I will send them a link to set up their own account on our tenant portal. And so this is a way that's a lot more streamlined and electronic, and you can do it from anywhere in the world. Even while I'm in Nicaragua, I've still looked over applicants and sent invites. So if you do it this way, the tenant will then receive their electronic invite to make an account. They'll go on there and I will have put how much they need to pay for the deposit and when it's due by, and then how much, first month's rent or whatever will be done. So then they can connect their bank account on their end and upload it, and I will see when the deposit is paid and the rent's paid. So then I can know, okay, they have already paid that. And so there's a paper trail, an electronic paper trail. So that way you have evidence and you already know that it's gone through. So that's probably the most streamlined and efficient way to do it, doing an electronic portal. But as we know, not everyone starts out that way. So, we're all in different stages of our landlady boss journey. So I like, Rachel, that you point that out and how to do it if you're just meeting them and getting a check and making sure that you're still documenting that correctly.
And something I changed for 2025 is how I did security deposits on my tenant portals. So I went into my chart of accounts and I created a new category. I did like a subcategory under security deposits, which is a liability because you're holding on to it. And I created a new account that said non-refundable portion of deposit. So it's just non-refundable deposit. And so then when I go and create the charge for them to pay their security deposit, I'll put $12.95 security deposit, and then I'll put $200 non-refundable deposit. And so now I have two categories under my liability. That's been really helpful. I know that's kind of in the weeds, but it's actually really makes a lot of sense when you're doing your own bookkeeping, that having a different category for the non-refundable portion.
I could see how that would make that super easy, because sometimes you get a non-refundable deposit if it's like a pet fee or there's just, extra special circumstances. So that's really good. I know sometimes if I have an applicant that, say they have a bankruptcy on their record, And, we dive into that. I do the due diligence. I see that, maybe it was from a death of a family member or a medical incident and, whatever. There's an explanation for it. Maybe they don't quite meet my normal requirements, but for whatever reason, I feel like they would be a good fit. I will sometimes do, a first and last month's deposit just because they're not our normal applicant for their overall financial picture is not normal what our application process would be. So I would make sure that, we are covered. So maybe I would do an extra hefty deposit.
Right.
So that's something to make note of the lease also. If you're doing something like that, that's out of the norm.
I do that with people who maybe own their own house and they've sold it. And so now they're going to rent, but I have no landlord to call. And so I can't actually establish that they are clean. And so I might increase the deposit to cover myself that way too.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of reasons that you can do that. And I have rarely been met with any resistance. If I say, I think you'd be a great tenant, but for this and this reason, we do need to do an extra large deposit. And, assuming everything goes well, you would get that back. I really haven't found a lot of pushback for that. Usually they're just happy that we're renting to them. So
how I figure out my non-refundable portion of the deposit, what that amount would be, is I usually will find out how much carpet cleaning is to do the apartment. And I make sure I carpet clean every time that I have a new tenant. So if it's $150 to carpet clean that house, then I think, okay, well, I'd like about $50 in order to do any minor wear and tear, things that would cover things that I would want to do each time. Maybe I need to deep clean balconies or power wash or something, the siding. So I put that together and then I take that as my non-refundable portion of the deposit. So if it's $200 that is non-refundable, I know that I'll have that amount in order to clean the carpets and to power wash the siding or something like that. So that's how I figure out that portion.
So the tenant would be paying for those things out of their deposit?
Yeah. So what it is it's basically administration fee. And so you have, if your deposit is $14.95 and $200 of that is non-refundable, you tell them that when they're applying, and I make sure, and so I make sure everybody understands that how much of it's non-refundable, and in my mind that amount is what I'm going to use it for. I keep that, and at the end that's my turnover expense that I have covered. So that's what I use.
Oh, perfect. Okay, that makes total sense. I like how you have that just kind of upfront and part of the lease agreement. They understand this is the administrative fee. I like that.
Yeah, I don't do application fees. A lot of people will do administrative fees as the application fee, and then they take that as income. And for me, I don't. I'll do an administration fee, but that actually is what I use to clean it.
That's great, because I know sometimes you even have the best tenants. I had one woman, she was a nurse, she kept it tidy, everything was great, and she went to move out and she left it a mess. Like, she left all this debris and junk in the garage. The place was not clean. Like, there wasn't damage per se. It wasn't like she thrashed the place, but the yard was a mess. Like, there were definitely expenses that had to go into turning the house over. And so, we went in, we had to haul away all of the debris and junk. I mean, because once they give me the key and they say, hey, we're moving out, we're done, I assume they're done. So we go in, and that's when, we have to start. So later, if they come back, it was actually a week later, she came back and said, hey, there were some things I still wanted to get out of the house. And I was like, no, it's cleaned out. Sorry, you gave us the key and said that you were moved out. So, she had no recourse at that point, but I mean, it was junk. Trash and stuff, and it wasn't like it was things, valuables that we need to store for a certain amount of time. So we went through, we cleaned it out. We had to do touch-up painting. We had to clean. We had to take care of the yard and haul all the stuff to the dump and everything. So we just kept really good itemized receipts. We took pictures, of course, as we talked about in part 1, taking pictures when you're going through and just making sure that you're keeping that documentation. And so then, with her itemized the deposit statement, we were able to say, this is the dump fees and hauling it away and labor for this and replacing this and touch-up paint and stuff. And I mean, there wasn't really a lot of pushback from her. She knew how she had left it, but I was just really surprised. But that's why you have the deposit, because you just never know. You don't know someone until they move out. You really
Right.
just don't know what they're going to be like.
Right. And the difference between abandoned items and items that you have to store until the legal time has passed. Let's say your state requires you to hold on to items for 30 days and make an effort to get them back to their owner by contacting them, etc. The difference is whether they sign off. So if they sign off and you have on the checkout sheet, you have on there all items left are abandoned and eligible to give away, then you now can count that as trash, debris that you can get rid of. If you don't have them sign off on that, then they could be left items and items that you now have to store for 30 days and try to get back to them. So that's an important distinction.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's important. And in Indiana, it's 90 days that we have to store them. But I'm glad that you brought that up because, yes, she had signed her tenant checkout form, which is why, once again, those forms, the tenant check-in and checkout forms, we have them for free on our website, landladyboss.com. They are so important to protect you and help you so that no one can come back like she came back. I should have mentioned she had already signed off on her checkout. So then she came back a week later saying, "Hey, I needed to get in for a couple things," and I'm like, "It's
this
gone."
protects you.
Yes, because she had already given us the key. She had already signed off on it, and there was nothing valuable there. It was junk, but we had already had to pay to haul everything away. So it really does protect you. So it was good.
Yeah, that's one of the things you can charge from the deposit. So let's talk about that. If they leave a bunch of belongings and it costs you money to pick up all the belongings, that's labor costs, mileage to drive it to the dump fee, and then storage fee. If you have to store it for 30 or 90 days, you can charge a storage fee. So all of those, in order to get rid of their personal belongings, is a cost that can come out of the deposit.
Exactly. And we do talk about, in episode 36, we talk about that tenant turnover process and what to do with their items if they have abandoned them. So take a listen to episode 36 if you want a more in-depth talk about that. But yes, there are certain things that you can include in the deposit and certain things you cannot. So you want to talk about, Rachel, some of the things that we can take out of the deposit?
Right. So let's just say there are large holes in the wall or a bunch of small holes, but it's going to require you to patch them. I find that tenants, if they have never owned a home, they underestimate the cost of having someone come in, fill the holes, come back, sand them, come back, paint them, come back, like all of those, and paint match. Or sometimes you can't get that paint matched perfectly, and so you end up having to do the whole wall. I mean, there's some cost that comes in with major damage. If it's one or two minor, like little holes that they've hung something, those are considered wear and tear. But damage would be larger holes that you have to fix, or a ton of them. Broken windows, broken lights, broken fixtures, broken appliances, holes in the ceiling, doors. Sometimes they'll just punch a door that is damaged. Missing or cracked tiles, chipped or broken enamel sinks and bathtubs, broken faucets. All of those things are damage. When you look at it and you think, I'm going to have to replace that, that's usually damage. The problem with, if it's a small, like let's just say it was a broken tile, but let's say that the house is, the tile is 15 years old. This is problematic because you can't just go and replace one tile. I mean, you can't match it. So the problem comes with how extensive is the damage. You have to ask yourself, well, what is the cost for me to bring it back to the state it was before they started renting from me? And then you also have to take into account the age of the product, like the carpet. If the carpet's 12 years old, you can't charge them the entire cost of a brand new carpet because you had 12 years wear and tear on that carpet. So it has to be something that you could defend in court when you need to go and replace what they've damaged.
And I think it can be a little subjective. I think that's the tricky part and why we get so many questions on what to include in the deposit and what you can't, because it's subjective. You don't really have like a hard and fast rule, but the things that you want to be aware of is that normal wear and tear are not to be taken out of the deposit. If it's just normal wear and tear, light scuffs on the floor or light marks on the walls, or things that are just faded paint, mildly worn carpet, maybe some loose hardware or door
Mhm.
handle. I mean, these are just normal wear and tear, but what you're talking about, Rachel, is excessive damage, things that are not normal. So yeah, when you have those missing or broken light fixtures, or yeah, you're saying holes in the wall, or you know, really bad stains in the carpet, or deep gouges in hardwood floors, or
Mhm.
your granite counters chipped or like gouged, or things that they're just not normal
Mhm.
wear and tear. Those are the things that you want to take out and that you need to take out of the deposit with proper documentation.
Right. And I think the tricky one is mildew and mold in the bathroom. I think that comes up a lot because people are like, well, is that something that is the tenant's fault or is that the landlady's fault? And like, that's a good
Mm.
question to talk about on this, I think.
Well,
What do you
I
think,
think that
Mary?
is the tricky one, because I think as a landlady, I have a responsibility that there's proper ventilation in the bathroom. And
Hmm.
so I've definitely gone in to rentals before and made sure that they have ventilation. We've added ceiling fans and ventilation and ductwork and stuff in bathrooms because it is such a problem, especially in the Midwest where, there's a lot of humidity.
Hmm.
So I feel like we have a responsibility to make sure that there's proper ventilation, but then there's also a responsibility on the tenant to not only use the ventilation, but to report if they see the starting of mold growing. If
Hmm.
they move out and there is just mold everywhere, they have never told you anything about this, and now
Hmm.
you've got to go in and do remediation. That's a problem that they did. That should have been reported to you. You should have been
Hmm.
able to go in and nip that in the bud from the get-go. So that's negligence on the tenant's part. I feel like if they have not reported anything and then it's just a big problem. If you haven't provided ventilation, they have repeatedly complained that there's too much moisture in the bathroom, and then they leave and now you're like, there's mold. There's some responsibility that you have on your end.
And also, if you've had that property for a while and other tenants don't have problems with that property and this tenant does, it's possible that they're just not using their fan. One thing, if you
Right.
are having consistent problems with the property and you do, the kills all and you get rid of the mold and you try to make sure the fan is working. One way to do that is you go and use a piece of toilet paper and stick it, hold it up by the fan, and if it sucks it up, then like not through the fan, but if it sucks it up against the fan vent, then it's working. And if it doesn't, then your fan's not working, right? So that's one little trick. But another thing you could do is you can have an electrician come and tie your fan turn on to your light switch so that they have to, when they turn on the light switch, have a fan going. It's not fabulous, but that is one way to ensure that your tenant is using the fan when they're using the light. So that's one thing to do.
Right, because that could be a big problem, and no one wants to have
Yeah.
to go do remediation then after the fact. So, yeah, making sure that you do that.
Autoban is the secret too, the secret weapon to go and put on areas that you want to, like around windowsills and in the bathroom to kind of inhibit mildew growth. But it is a thing. And
Right.
also making sure everything's caulked. I mean, like, look at your caulk job. Make sure that in between tenants that everything's been caulked properly. That's an important way to keep moisture out from warping your vanity.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, assuming the maintenance things are being handled, you go in after they move out, and the normal wear and tear things, you can't charge them for every little
Hmm.
scuff on the paint, or faded wallpaper, or worn carpet, mildly worn carpet. You can't
Right.
go and ding them for all that stuff, or you are going to have some severe pushback or problems, right? So
Right.
making
Right.
sure that you're being reasonable and your expectations are clear of what you
Hmm.
expect when they're moving in, and what you cover and what you don't
Right.
is going to be huge, and being up on your maintenance things like you're saying. So all these things will help to
Hmm.
prevent big problems when they move out.
Right. And let's just go to that part. So they've moved out, you've done all the damages, you've put it together in an itemized list. You have photos and receipts, and you get that to them. If you're mailing them a deposit, then you can mail them the itemized list with that. If you're emailing it, you can email the information and then send them their check too. Just, it's really important that they have access to be able to see that. It could be on their tenant ledger too. You can go to your tenant ledger and click a last 90 days or a full ledger and send it by email so that they have that, and then send your deposit. But let's talk about that. So some states require you to give the interest that the deposit has earned if they've lived there over a year to the tenant. So that's an interesting question, is how much did their deposit accrue? And all of that is difficult to tease out. But I think every year on December 31st, your bank should post onto your account what it's a 1099 INT. It's your interest income that you've received from that savings account that you put your security deposit in. So, that $2.26 should go back to the tenant if you're in a state that requires that.
Yes, absolutely. That's good to remind everyone about. And as we talked about in part 1 of the deposits, you wouldn't be commingling the funds. You have them in the separate accounts. And if it isn't an interest-bearing account, you really want to make sure you know your state laws, because like Indiana, that if it earns interest legally, we don't have to return that to the tenant. But if you do, you want to make sure that you are aware of that, so you're not breaking any laws. So that's a really good point to point out.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah. Just knowing that. There's so much about this, right? Just like a lot.
So many things. We obviously are sharing the things that we've learned over the years, what to do, what not to do, and how to hopefully help protect you and your property and to make things run smoothly. So, when we talk about those check-in and check-out forms and taking those pictures and keeping everything in writing and copies of everything, and it's to protect you, right? To make sure that you are communicating well with the tenant, that you're staying organized and compliant, and just making sure that you are going to be protected. You do not want to open yourself up for legal issues because you didn't realize a time frame, or you didn't know that you had to return it to them by a certain amount of time, and so then you have to end up refunding the entire amount of the deposit. So knowing those guidelines, being aware, as I mentioned in part 1, Indiana is the 45-day rule, so I have 45 days to return the deposit and the itemized list with it. So super important to know those things. So I think our big takeaways here would be check your state laws. Make sure that you are compliant with the rules and laws in your own state, because each state is different. Make sure you know an interest-bearing account, do you need to give the tenant the interest that their deposit has accrued over the terms of their lease? Are you using check-in, check-out forms? Are you taking pictures and having them sign off on things to protect you? So just really check those laws, make sure you know the time frames that you're supposed to do everything in, and so that you're not left vulnerable and open to litigation.
Right. And I would make sure you check your contract and make sure that you can take rent out of the security deposits, that you can take utilities out of the security deposits, and damage. Like, you list that out and make sure that you have that in your contract so that you are legally able to take those things out of the security deposit.
Absolutely. And one thing we didn't talk about, but you can also take unpaid rent out of the deposit. At least I can in my state. So, if they leave and they haven't paid all of the rent, that is able to come out of the deposit. And then if what they owe is more than what is in the deposit, that is when you can then pursue a financial settlement with them and possibly go to small claims court or something like that. So that's why it's so important when they move out, make sure you get that forwarding address so you can send the deposit to them, because if they do not give you a forwarding address, you are not legally bound to send them the deposit. So I sometimes have tenants that do not want to give me a forwarding address for whatever reason, I don't know, but I just remind them and say, if I don't have a forwarding address, I have no way to send you the deposit if there is anything to refund. So that usually gets people wanting to give me their address. But it also, if you need a forward mail, but if you do need to do a financial settlement against them because they end up owing, having that address is very important to serve court papers.
Also, make sure that you write the deposit check out to both tenants' names so that they both have to sign it in order to get that security deposit back. That just covers your bacon if one of them cashes it and the other one said, "Where is it?" and they didn't share.
Oh, so, very good point. Very good point. Put the names of the people that are on the lease on the deposit refund check. Very good point. So tons of good things here. I think that this is great advice, if I say so myself. Learn the hard way.
All the stuff we wish we knew.
All the things that we wish we knew. Absolutely. I've years of mistakes and just trying to figure things out. And hopefully this consolidates it and helps you go forward confidently with your deposits with your tenants. And if you want to learn more, we also have courses available at landladyboss.com. They're packed full of information. They have workbooks to go along with them. They are not expensive, but they are all the things that we wish we had known from the get-go and that we had to learn through trial and error in the hard way. So hopefully we've made it super easy for you to kind of know all these nuances and ins and outs of landladying. So good luck with that. Happy renting. Yeah. And we would love to hear from you. Feel free to email us at landladybosses@gmail.com. We would love questions or topics or feedback. Check out social media at Facebook and Instagram at Landlady Boss. And then our courses and other information and those free forms, the tenant check-in and check-out, we have on landladyboss.com. So check those out and get your free copies. We appreciate you so much. Good luck with everything you do. If you're enjoying this, please share it with other landlady bosses and people that can benefit from this. And remember, no one can manage your property as well as you.